You silly rabbit, Netflix for kids. Wait, is that Tricks? Hello everyone, so September is over and just like every other year, we've now moved into October, which means I have a spider in the background because it's October, it's Halloween. So I can have a dumb Halloween set just like every other YouTuber that I'm trying so desperately to be. But anyway, this is a good old-fashioned update video, and I know I haven't made one in like 6 months, but I'm gonna make this more frequent. I'm gonna get off my lazy butt and stop pushing it off and just do it. So hopefully I'll be doing this more frequently because I sort of just like filling you guys in on what I'm watching or buying and not actually talking about, because there are some movies that fall through the cracks that I watch that I want to talk about that I just don't have enough to say for a video, I guess. So it's gonna be like I'm daily vlogging, except once a month and not like that at all. Alright, so let's just start out by talking about the movies that I saw this month that I didn't talk about. And to do that, to remember which ones I saw, I have a little diary.
What are you, gay?
On Letterboxd. If you don't know what Letterboxd is, just look it up. To kick it off, I watched Baywatch at the start of this month. Yes, the Rock movie, Baywatch, with Zac Efron, and I found it to be the worst thing I've ever seen. But seriously, it's one of the worst movies that I have ever seen, especially with as big a budget as it has. It's right up there with the Star Wars prequels on how terrible it is. In fact, this movie is so terrible that I found myself enjoying it, because I was constantly at a wonderment about why any of the decisions were made. I was like, why did that just happen? Who made that choice? Why is this talking scene cut like an action film? What is going on? Why are they on a boat but it's green screened? You can clearly see they have a beach at their disposal, so why did they green screen them on a boat? What is going on? I haven't seen Emoji Movie, I won't. But as far as I've seen, Baywatch is probably the worst thing I've ever seen this year. Next up, we have The Berlin Syndrome. And this movie I found to be incredibly bland and mediocre. And the worst kind of mediocre, where you come into it and go out of it feeling the exact same way. It leaves no lasting impact. It doesn't make you feel bad. It doesn't make you feel good. It's just kind of there and then it leaves. It's just the most boring, superficial kidnap, horror, thriller, whatever it can possibly be. You watch it and then you're not watching it, and you wasted 2 hours. Next up we have Colossal. This one's starring Anne Hathaway. The basic premise of this movie is actually pretty interesting. Oh, my eye, I don't know what the frick's going on with my eye. So Colossal's basic premise is that Anne Hathaway, whenever she walks into a park in her hometown, she becomes a monster in Tokyo, and the monster mimics her every action. So that's kind of a weird idea that I sort of like, but the movie quickly devolves into one of the most infuriating, stupid art house comedies that I've seen in a while. Every character in this movie is unlikable. Every single character in this movie is unlikable. And that is the #1 thing that Colossal does wrong. Its main character is so stupid and annoying that I found it impossible to connect with her. And then the person that ultimately becomes the villain of the story is so mustache-twirling villain-like. I would categorize Colossal as the most annoying movie I've seen this year. It's still okay because the premise is cool, it's pretty well made, and all the performances are decent to good, and the direction is solid, but the characters and the ending completely ruin it for me. The characters are overly obnoxious and way over the top, and the ending is borderline retarded. It doesn't make any sense and is completely stupid. But if you want to see it based on the premise alone, I couldn't blame you. That's the only reason I watched it. Next up, I watched a movie with Peter Dinklage called Rememory. This movie was free on Google Play, which is a scary thing in and of itself, to have a movie that's free. I watched it and I thought that it was pretty boring. It's just like the running theme for this month's movie. Rememory is nothing special. It's about an inventor that comes up with a machine that can take your memories out of your brain and display them perfectly so that you don't have any fabrication with it. And it's an interesting idea on its own, but the movie quickly devolves into melodrama and stupid plot twists and philosophical themes that are bigger than the movie, and everything in this movie feels out of reach. Everything in this movie doesn't quite belong, and they never develop on too many themes very well. The only thing that I'll say that I enjoyed was the direction was actually solid, and Peter Dinklage was pretty good. I thought the performances here were pretty good. It was nice to see Star Trek man. What's his name? It's kind of hard to sit through, honestly. Next, oh frick. Next, I saw After the Storm, which is I think a Chinese movie. I could be wrong. The movie does actually a pretty good job of building the characters, fleshing out the characters, and giving them real motivations and real struggles and real things to do. And that's what this movie does best. It's very slow. It's very dry. It's shot very abruptly. I don't know if that's the right word. It's just it's shot dry. It's just a lot of tripods, a lot of just panning movements, very simple, very mundane, I think it's a better word. The characters are trying to work their things out. They're the most complex part of this movie. There's no explosive story. There's no crazy plot twist. It's just real. It feels like real people trying to work out their problems. And if you think that sounds boring, then it probably is going to be boring for you. But for me, it was boring in a good way. So I thought After the Storm was a good movie, if not, oh frick. It's certainly a human movie. It really explores humanity pretty well. It does a good job of all that. It just sort of falls short in almost every other respect. So I can't really recommend this one, even though I sort of like it. I think it's solid, but I don't know who the audience for this is, really, except me. Next, I saw David Lynch, The Art of Life, a documentary about the acclaimed director David Lynch, of course. And this movie was, again, just sort of bland. It's a very, very by-the-numbers retelling of David Lynch's life. And if you like David Lynch, that could be interesting, and I do. So I found it to be sort of interesting to see what brought him to where he is now and what he did to become who he is. But if you don't like David Lynch, it's a big who cares. The whole movie is like, who cares? Why do I want to know what house he lived in on what street and what era? So this movie does a good job of recounting the exactly David Lynch's life, but it does literally nothing else. So I can't say that it's good. It's a very passable documentary, and I would say pass on it. I was going to make a full-length video on Mother. I did make a sort of goof video about Mother, but I'm kind of glad that I didn't, because when I first came out of Mother, I was calling it the best movie of the year. I absolutely loved it. And then I started watching interviews with Darren Aronofsky, and his pretentious, arrogant attitude toward the movie, where he says, "This is my movie, and it's not for anybody but me," made it feel very, very hollow, because the movie's all an elaborate metaphor, and I took away something completely different than what he wanted me to. And that is why my rating for this significantly declined, because I was trying to interpret it on my own, and then he came along and said, "Nope, any interpretation you have is wrong except for the one that I wanted it to be."
And then there's also another bigger metaphor going on underneath it, which is this idea that, we are all living on this one planet with one mother who gave us life, and how do we treat her?
So, I still think it's great. I think Mother is one of the better movies of the year. The direction, the performances, the stakes, the tension, the claustrophobia that it all instills is incredibly palpable. It's one of the most just like tense movies where I just was sick the entire time. So in that respect, it's still a great movie. It accomplishes its goal, and it does it very, very well. It's just that the rest of it is basically just a metaphor, and the metaphor can only be one thing. So it's kind of obnoxious in that regard. But I'd still recommend Mother. If you like weird movies that don't make a whole lot of sense and just sort of tons of stuff happens and it's incredibly intense, you'd probably like this. Next, I watched The Evil Within, which is like a 75% a bad B movie and 25% a pretty solid effects horror movie. This movie was made by a guy that I cannot remember his name, who is dead now. Don't know why I bring that up, but he's dead now. And it's bad. It's a bad movie, but it's pretty entertaining, actually. The ending is incredibly stupid, but everything leading up to that point is super fun. This is one of the more entertaining bad B movies that I've seen this year. It's a lot of fun to watch and has some actually incredibly solid visuals and special effects. Like, the practical effects that this movie has are really, really cool, and there's some really cool visual tricks that the movie employs. So I would honestly say check The Evil Within out. It's actually on Amazon Prime right now, so you can watch it for free. Anyway, next up we have Personal Shopper. This movie starring Kristen Stewart, and I found this to be very boring. Next up we have The Kingsmen, The Golden Circle, and this is probably the worst sequel I've seen this year. It's terrible. It's shockingly terrible. It's 2.5 hours long, which is a half hour longer than the first Kingsman. It's lost all its comedic wit. It's lost all of the satire of the first one. It's lost any kind of good characters, and it spends an hour of time retconning the first one, which is incredibly frustrating. And Julianne Moore as the villain is so flat and so boring and so motiveless that she basically is a non-factor in the movie. And it sucks. I actually really like the first one, and watching this movie kind of hurt because it sucks so bad. And the same creative team came back from the first one, and all the same actors came back, and it sucks. It's really bad. So I cannot say you should see this unless you already have. Then I'm sorry that you had to sit through that. Next up is A Ghost Story. This one is an acclaimed movie coming out of Sundance Film Fest, and it's really boring, and not a lot happens, and it's mostly stupid and doesn't make a whole lot of sense and is incredibly pretentious. Next up, we have The Salesman. The Salesman is an Iranian film? Correct me if I'm wrong. And they move into this apartment, and within like the first week of them being there, they find out that the previous tenant of the apartment was some kind of like hooker, and one of her clients decided to come to the room one night and found out that she wasn't living there and did some bad stuff. And that's all I'll say. But this movie is actually incredibly engaging because it's like, it starts off with that, where it's like, who did this? It's a whodunit thriller mystery, essentially, set to a very, very slow character drama, which is kind of ingenious. But the one problem I do have with it is that a lot of the stuff with the play, there's a play that's sort of interwoven in all of this that the characters are in. A lot of that feels like it's unnecessary. I mean, a couple scenes here and there I'd be okay with, but it's like half the movie, so it kind of kills the pacing for me a couple times. But other than that, this movie's really great. It's a really, really great mystery, and it ends in a very, very satisfying way. So I'd recommend The Salesman. It won Best Foreign Language Movie at the Oscars last year, and it just came out this year in my area. So you should be able to see it now. I saw it on Amazon Video very, very recently, of course. And it's good. So check it out. Next, I saw Starship Troopers, which is a really solid satire of and basically a fascist movie. It's really, really depressing, really, really dark, really, really violent, and really, really entertaining. So I would say check out that. Next up, we have Friend Request, and Friend Request is terrible, but it's one of those movies that's really boring and terrible, so there's not a lot to say about it. It's just everything it does is wrong, and it's really boring while it does it. Next up, we have The Cult of Chucky, which is the 7th installment in the Chucky franchise, and it is not good. I mean, what Chucky movie is that good, honestly? But it has sort of an interesting environment in that it's set in a psychiatric home where everyone's insane and everything's very sterilized. It's all like white, and that's sort of an interesting environment. And Chucky is back, and he's hilarious as ever. His character sort of saves this movie for me. Every scene that he's in was fun and enjoyable. And then there's like 4 of them running around by the end, and that was great. But the lead up to the ending is so incredibly boring and so emotionless and bland and dry and characterless that it's hard to sit through, to be honest. The first hour or so of this movie just feels like nothing's going on. Every character's flat, every scenario's boring, everything is predictable, and it's stupid. It's really stupid. But the ending's sort of interesting. So if you can sit through the majority of this movie to get to the ending, I'd recommend it in that way. Last, but certainly not least, we have Geralds Game, which is the latest Stephen King adaptation directed by Mike Flanagan, who is actually a pretty good director of horror, specifically horror. I won't say too much about this one because it just came out and it just hit Netflix. So if you haven't seen it, I would recommend it. Go check it out on Netflix. It's a pretty solid, small-scale, one-room thriller. It's good. Go check it out. And that's it. That's all I saw. I saw a bunch of movies, I know. I know this is a long video, but I saw a lot of movies this month, and I even excluded some that I saw, like The Social Network, which is from 2012. So I decided not to talk about that one. But that's it. Hopefully I can do more of these. I do like talking about some of the movies that I normally wouldn't, to just give them a little bit of limelight and maybe recommend something to you that you wouldn't have seen, something that you wouldn't have seen before. So yeah, that's it.